My grandfather went blind when he was like 5 years old, and I heard about it when I was really young, and I kind of like had this obsession with blindness after that, and I wanted to know what his life was like, even though I never got to meet him. And I would just go walk around the house and like close my eyes and see if I could like walk around and stuff. And then I found out like 10 years later that I was actually blind myself. And so I kind of always had this want to help other blind people. So I started volunteering at a center in Santa Cruz that helped other legally blind people, usually elderly, mostly elderly people. And I went to the center, started working there, and was assigned to work with this woman whose name was Margaret. And so I would go to her house or retirement home every week, and we would just talk about her life, and she would tell me stories. She was a single mom when she was raising children, and it was very hard at that time for a woman to work at all. So it was a very difficult time for her to be raising kids, and she had the greatest stories to tell me, even though she told me them multiple times. And so one of the times that I went to see her, I brought my Kindle with me, and I enlarged the text for her so she could see the book, and she started reading, and she hadn't read in 5 years. So it was so cool to see someone being able to use these technologies that I'd always used and my grandfather had always used, and she was able to use them to read for the first time in 5 years. So the next week I called her every time before I went to her home. And I called her, and she didn't answer, so I kept calling, and I kept calling, and I got all the way to the retirement home, and I went to her door, and there was a sign on it, and she wasn't there. I knocked many times, so I went to the receptionist, and they told me she was in the hospital with pneumonia. So I was really worried, and I found out where the hospital was, and I called them, and they said that I could talk to her, but she was very confused. And then later on, when I called the hospital, they said it was just family who was allowed to talk. And so I got a call from the Vista Center, the center I was working with, a week later while I was in LA instead of being in Santa Cruz, and they said that she had passed away. So I was pretty sad, and I wished I could have been there for her in the last weeks, and I could have seen her. There was no memorial, at least not to my knowledge, and so they just had a memorial at the center, and everyone talked about her, and they said that I was basically all she would talk about, and they said she had kind of given up on life, but I never saw that because she was always so happy to see me, and we always had such a nice time speaking with each other and understanding each other for both having the same problem. So there was a book, and I wrote in the book about just a letter to her. People were writing, and I wrote a letter to her, and I told her that I missed her, and I wish I could have been there for the end of her life more, and I wish I had met her earlier, and just how much she had influenced me and inspired me. And then it's kind of like my grandfather. He died because of his blindness. He fell down a flight of stairs that he couldn't see. But a week earlier, my dad had just graduated college, so my grandparents were very excited and were talking about how they basically had lived a fulfilled life, and that their children were already off doing their own thing, and like if anything had to happen, then it would be okay because they had lived a fulfilled life. And I think for Margaret it was a lot harder because my grandfather was always used to his blindness, but Margaret really did give up once she started going blind. And my grandfather didn't give up, but he was ready to go when he did. And I just hope that I will be the same and that I'll be ready, but my eyesight won't get in the way of anything.